Hello guys, welcome to another video. Today we are going to do a quick tier list. It's been a couple months since the last time I have done one of these, and just kind of give you guys a little bit of insight on what's being more like prioritized and or what's like a top pick at the higher level slash more in the competitive side of Predecessor. I do expect this to kind of shift a little bit as the next few patches roll out before the 6 item patch. So definitely keep that in mind a little bit. But it's always a good spot to start with a little tier list since it's been a little bit of time. I'm just going to get straight into it. Firstly, we have Countess. I think Countess is pretty okay right now. She's solid in jungle. Her laning is really bad still, but her jungle is pretty good. It does get a little bit worse since you take a little bit more damage now in the early game, which makes her a little bit more susceptible to invading or like getting invaded. Which kind of sucks, but at the same time, you gotta take what you can get. She's still very viable. Spirit of Amir being a good item on her can definitely allow you to kind of get out of the early game a little bit easier, and she still has really good ganks coming off the red buff, level 2 and level 3. Moving on, we have Crunch. Crunch got a little bit of a shift a little bit, and some of his items have gotten buffed a little bit. Last patch, or like last tier list, I think I had him in B tier. I'm going to move him up a little bit to A tier this time. I think he's a little bit more viable now with some of the characters in solo lane getting nerfed a little bit, like Steel and stuff like that. So he kind of gets a little bit more prevalent in the off lane. And then he is like okay into some of the top tier picks like Kwang. He does have a decent matchup into. So he goes up a little bit as well from the last tier list. So he's just kind of sitting average right now. Could go up or down in the next few months, or when there's 6 items, for example, he might go up, he might go down. Who knows? Since we got a couple months till that, anyways. But for now, he's all right. Dekker, I believe she was a S tier in the last patch, or like the last tier list. I think she's more of like an A tier pick now. She's not the best support, but she's still really strong. Probably like third best support, I would say, third priority pick. She's definitely the best range support, but you see a lot more heavy priority on things like Riktor and things like that in the competitive level, especially in like bans. He's been getting banned a lot in scrims and in the last PCC and the Friday night tournaments. He's been getting banned a lot. So she definitely has gotten down a little bit in priority, but she's still a top pick. Generally picked up, second or third in most compositions. Definitely a priority support, just not the best support right now. Then we got a Drongo. I still think Drongo is top tier. I don't think he's quite S tier yet, just because some of the other characters are a little bit above him, but he is still top tier, great ADC. Gag Grenade, still one of the best abilities in the game, still safe in the lane. CC Immune ult can allow you to immune things like Rampage Rock and stuff like that. Very strong character, good laning phase, good late game, just all around fantastic pick. Feng Mao. Feng Mao's pretty bad competitively now. He was a little bit more viable on the last set of patches, but with the recent jungle changes, he takes a lot more damage. And then in lane, in jungle and in mid, he's pretty like susceptible to just getting bullied out really hard early game since he needs to scale a little bit, and you can't really invade as easily now. He is pretty weak. I don't think he's the worst character in the game, but he's pretty bad. There are situations where you can pick him, which is kind of the reason I don't have like a D tier on this for like don't pick. I think every character is viable, but you need a very specific set of situations where you are going to actually play Feng Mao and have like a very effective game. It's just really hard to get away with at a high level, and when people know what to do and they know how to play around Feng Mao and what to do against him, it's really hard to get away with at a very high competitive level. But still playable, just on the really weak side. I might even put him B tier. I think he is situationally good, specifically more so in the fact that he can lane against characters like Sevarog and Shinbi and stuff like that, which you aren't seeing a lot of, but I could definitely see them coming back into the meta a little bit more as time goes on. Then we move on to Gadget. Gadget's pretty weak as well, but I don't think she is Feng Mao weak. I think she's in the A tier. She's just kind of your general mage pick. Uh, Unfortunately, a lot of the mages are in the A plus and in the S tier. She is just in the average tier, unfortunately, compared to the other mages, which is kind of sucks for her, but she's still playable. She's fine. She's just really weak early game, very weak laning phase. But once you get to those team fights in the mid late game, you could be really strong in the impact that you can have in the game. Then we have Gideon. Gideon has been S tier for quite some time. He's kind of gone down recently with the removal of his super jump, but he's a little bit more in the A plus tier now. Still strong, still good at what he does, but you kind of need to be able to play him well. Not anybody can really play him anymore. There's not a lot of Gideon players in the meta other than myself and maybe like Empty or somebody like that in the EU. But he is still good, just not the priority mage pick at the moment, considering how strong some of these other mages are. Greystone. I think Greystone's a little bit of a sleeper pick competitively right now. I think he's still A+. People haven't been playing him as much recently after the last PCC. He hasn't really gotten touched at all. None of his items really have gotten touched other than Basilisk. But I still think he's like A+ tier. Most people would probably put him in the A tier. I think he is still A+. He's very strong at what he does. You can just kind of be a menace, really. You just walk at people, not really much you can do. You get a lot of ability cooldowns used on you. You do have to be a little bit safe in the lane. I think he's good in the Kwang, which actually puts him a lot higher on the tier list than most of the solo laners, just due to the fact that Kwang is so oppressive in the lane. As far as jungle, his jungle is okay. Still a little bit slow. He does get beat up a little bit more by the camps in the early game, as does most characters. And he's a little bit slow in the jungle, but he's still very playable and not like bad by any stretch. I think he is very solid in the A tier. A+ tier, sorry. Then we have Grux. He's been played a lot more recently. I think people kind of have learned to kind of play Grux, and they pick it just to win pressure in the lane. Last tier list, I think I had him in C tier. I think he's a little bit more in the B tier. I don't think he's that good, truthfully. His jungle's a little better since he is more sustained than most characters in the jungle, so you don't get bullied by the camp so much. And then the lane, he is still strong in the lane, but you're very easily ganked, unfortunately. I do think he is like pickable, but you need to have a situation where you need to play around it. You need to draft a team comp specifically where Grux makes sense. You pick it to win the matchup, and then you have to play on that side of the map with your jungle. Your jungle has to vertical. You play for the mini primes. You play for the rotations of the Grux. You play with him to keep the enemy solo laner down. But he's more of a counter pick than anything, and if you try to pick it at any point prior to last pick, you're just going to get ganked and you're going to get picked down the entire game, and then you're going to be Grux behind, and Grux from behind is a non-factor. Next up, we have Howitzer. Howitzer was A tier in the last patch. I think he is S tier now. I think he is the second best mid laner behind Belica. We'll get to her later. He is the counter to Belica, which shows to his priority. He does get countered by Gideon, though, which is important to note. Gideon, and I think Faye, when we get to her, I'll talk about her. He does get countered by a lot of the stuff that's up here, but he is still very strong. His damage output is very strong. His burst is really good. He one-shots ADCs. He's good against assassins. He's good against tanks. He's safe. He has CC. He kind of does everything you need him to do. Very similar to Belica, where they just kind of do everything, and there's not really much you can do against it other than just kind of not try to take a trade early game. He has good poke, long range. If you get like half health, he just ults you and you die, and there's not much you can do about it. So very strong character. Is countered by a lot, but he also counters a lot himself. And then he does have a lot of outplay ability with the mine and floating in the air and ulting and all that kind of stuff. So he is very good right now. I do think he is probably the second best mid laner. I'm not going to say arguably the best, but if one of the other mid laners, aka Belica, gets nerfed a little bit, he could definitely end up being the number one priority mid, even maybe getting banned potentially. He also does have the weird flex of, sometimes you could play him in solo or in support. Not really common, but there are situations where it could be viable. Next up, we have Kallari. People think this character is like really bad for some reason, especially in casuals. People think this character is like C tier. In casuals, I would put her S tier. In competitive play, I think she's like an A+. You have to be really good at playing Kallari in order to get away with it. Unfortunately, there's not really a lot of good Kallari players, so there's not a lot of people that actually get threatened by it. But for example, when you play against a player like Six, who happens to be like the best Kallari in the game probably, or like Nugslit or somebody like that that's really good and proficient on the character, you really have to play around the character specifically, and you have to play the game a completely different way than you would if the enemy team had a different jungler. She's very good early game at ganking. She does get beat up a little bit more by the camps, but that's kind of like, you're going to get beat up by the camps as Kallari anyways, so it doesn't really change too much in that regard. You just have to be a little bit more proactive in the early game. I do think she is very strong at a high level. In casuals, the average little Timmy, it is probably a C tier character. In casuals on a high tier player against Timmy's, it's probably an S tier character. In most games, competitively speaking, I'd say she's probably an A to an A plus character. I'm going to put her A plus just because of the fact that you have to play the game completely differently when she's in the game, but you could definitely make the argument for her being A tier. I do think you also have to be really good at Kallari in order to get away with it. The other problem with Kallari is that you have to watch out for Khaimera, not the other top jungler, but a character that is picked very heavily, especially in casuals and like higher level casuals. He's picked a lot. He does counter Kallari. Typically, the way you play picks and bans, if you're second pick, you will. The other team picks something, you pick two things, the other team picks two things, and then you pick Kallari, ban Khaimera. The enemy team now gets in a weird spot. Or you you pick something else, then you ban Khaimera. The other team then gets a ban. If they don't ban Kallari, you pick Kallari in the fourth slot. It's very hard to deal with. Very good characters all around. Doesn't get beat up by the camps. Has good invade, good early game. Very strong tank in the late game. Can run people down. He's just really good. Kind of does everything you need. Very easy to play. Nothing too crazy. Just hard to really play against. But he did get nerfed a little bit, so I don't think he's S tier quite. I don't think he's the best jungler. I think he's just good into everything, so you can always pick it and be confident that it's going to have value. Next up, we have Kira. I mean, she's just an average ADC, really. I don't really think there's ever a situation where you want to pick Kira. I think you just pick Kira because a lot of the other ADCs are off the table. She's just average. I'm never really, happy to have a Kira on my team, but I'm never disappointed either. She's just a basic ADC. Nothing too crazy to say about her. She's just average. The average Jane, I suppose. Next up, we have Belica. She is probably the best mage in the game, and by probably I mean she is 100% the best mage in the game. You can go back, 3-4 tournaments. She's priority picked, priority banned, last PCC, last Fang booth. She one-shots people, unmissable ultimate, drone is oppressive. She's a really good character. Plays two roles at a high level at a high pick priority. She's very good. In either role, she one-shots in either role. She just does everything you need. CC through the wall is fantastic. Just an insane character. Very, very good right now. If you don't play Belica, I would highly recommend playing Belica. Except we have Morigesh. She's gotten buffed a little bit. I think last time I had her in the C tier as the worst character in the game. I think she's a little bit better now. I think she's in the B, maybe the A range. I've been seeing a few people pick her in scrims and things like that to varying degree of success. The unfortunate problem with Morigesh is I think she gets bullied by the two best mid laners, which is Howitzer and Belica, and it's very hard to get a game where one of those is not able to be picked by the enemy team. Simply due to the way draft priority has been going recently. A lot of people have been banning Riktor, and then you kind of get forced to ban Kwang if you're the second team. And with Argus coming into the mix later, she's going to have a lot more struggling potential against a lot of the top picks, especially in mid lane, since it's very hard to first ban one of the mids without giving up too much elsewhere. Unless the exception would be if you were to pick like Belica and then you ban Howitzer and then you pick Murdock later in the draft, which I believe is what the EU team, Important Shin's team, has been doing when they pick it. It is just a pick that you had to be proficient on, and you had to be very situationally picked, very similar to Grux or Feng Mao. I don't think it's ever something that you're going to prioritize highly. Then we have Murdock. He's kind of in a similar boat as Kira, except I think he's probably a little stronger than Kira. I just don't think he's on that same A plus level of Drongo. I don't think you're ever upset to have a Murdock, but he is that secondary thought pick. You never first pick him. You're never let's make sure we pick up Murdock here. It's just what ADCs are up on the table. Okay, give me Murdock. That's basically how it goes. He's just another average Jane ADC. He left clicks. He has a global ult, which is really nice, but you don't really get an insane amount of value off it. It is really good, and you can definitely play around it correctly, but he's nothing too crazy, as most ADCs aren't. They're just kind of a sleeper role right now, unfortunately. Muriel. I think Muriel's kind of gone down a little bit. I think she was bordering A+. I think she's just solidly A now. She's still strong in the laning phase early game. You could be very aggressive. Falls off a little bit mid game, then she gets really strong in the late game. She's still just kind of average. I don't think there's anything crazy about her. you do have to play around her correctly, and you do need double frontline in order to pick it. With the priority on some of the other picks that have been getting picked, you could definitely see her being played. I know Rampage has been getting played a lot. She's usually really good with Rampage. She's good with things like Khaimera, stuff that really gets in there and then can set up easily for a free knockup. I don't think she's bad by any stretch, but I'm never picking her over any of the top supports. And there's so many supports in the game now, you don't really get forced into picking it either. Narbash. I think Narbash is probably A plus tier. I think he's a little bit underrated right now. I think most people think he's around A tier. He's been getting not really prio, but he's been getting picked a lot in the second phase in like competitive play and in like higher end games. I usually see him always win. It's very rare you see a Narbash lose. It's very hard to play against. You're weak in the lane, but you do have a good setup with the stun into gank potentially like that. The movement speed is insane. The healings are always nuts. The ult is good. I think I think most people would say he's A tier. I think he's A plus. I just don't see him lose. I think he always has value, and he's just always like solid in most of the games that I see. So I'm gonna have to put him in A plus tier. But you could definitely argue him for A tier. FaZe. I think FaZe is probably an A tier character. She's more of a counter pick than anything. You do have to be kind of good at FaZe, and you play it in a very specific way. You basically play it to not win duo. But you could definitely abuse things like combinations such as, Wraith and things like that. I don't think she's overly amazing. I don't think she's terrible. My team does tend to ban this a lot just because my duo lane doesn't like playing against it. But that's, a personal preference thing as opposed to the character being overly strong, in my opinion. I think she's just FaZe. She does what FaZe does. And, you can get countered just via playstyle. It's just a different type of playstyle. It's a little bit more of a passive playstyle. The one thing that FaZe doesn't bring is rotational power. So if you rotate, a lot of the top supports, Dekker will rotate into mid or Belica or something like that. They'll rotate the river and you can just pick somebody off a quick CC. That's one thing FaZe cannot do, which is part of the reason why I don't think she's in the S or the A plus tier. I think her gank potential and her like roam potential is really weak. And I think that limits her from being a top support, mainly more than anything. And then the fact that you are a little bit of a squishy character, and if there is any assassins such as Kallari in the game, you just don't get to play the rest of the game, unfortunately. Definitely not a bad character, but definitely not a top character either. Rampage, I think he's a pretty average. He's been getting a lot of priority picks in the like A plus tier. He was banned a little bit in Fang Booth. I know he was like top picked. I think he was the most picked character, or like there was like 4 characters that was top picked, top banned in every game. In Fang Booth, I think he was one of them, but he got nerfed a little bit since then. So I think he's probably like an A tier character. I think people overrate him a little bit. I know EU really likes playing him, but I just haven't seen the same level of success in NA. I think he is a little bit of an overrated character. He kind of always is. I think last PCC he was probably around B tier. I think he's around A tier now in like high level competitive play. You could definitely pick him, but I do think he is a little bit weak. Maybe he's A plus. You could argue A plus. I'll put him A plus because I don't really want to argue. But I think he is probably an A tier character. I think people kind of overrate him a little bit. I think people are bad at playing against him. I don't think people respect the rock through the fog wall enough, and I don't think people just kill him. A lot of the time people see a Rampage ult and they just don't think they can kill him. Unfortunately, you can if you play around it correctly and you actually like hit him essentially. But we'll see. I just think he is probably a little bit of an A tier character, but I'm gonna put him A plus just because I think that's where most people would have him. He is a little bit slow in the jungle. He doesn't really get beat up by camps, though, because of his passive. He's strong level 6, strong late game. Good character if you need a frontliner, if you pick like a Muriel on your team or one of these like, not frontliney supports. Very strong if you want like a Shinbi off lane or something like that. He is very good with that as well. Next up we have Revenant. I think Revenant is probably the worst character in the game. There is just not a character that I think gets less value. Every time I see a Revenant, he's feeding. If he's not feeding, then he's playing against people that are significantly worse than him. You don't really have a strong lane. Your late game is pretty strong, but you get out DPS by other ADCs. You can't build Sky Splitter, so you struggle to kill tanks. I just think he's pretty bad. I would rather have pretty much any other character or any other ADC than have Revenant on my team. I think he is really bad. I do not like seeing this on my team. Every time I see it in competitive, it always loses. It gets 0 value. You could say, yeah, you could ult a jungler and stuff like that, and that's true. He does have some strengths, but I just don't think it's ever worth picking. So I'm going to say he's probably the worst character in the game right now, in my honest opinion. Next up, we have Riktor. Arguably the best character in the game. If you're hitting the hooks, which you should be if you're playing at a high level, he's insane. He is the best support in the game if you hit every hook. He could flex jungle, he could flex solo. His solo is a little weak, you get ganked a little bit, kind of like Grux. His jungle is a little slow, you get beat up by the camps now, since they follow you a little bit. But his support is still absolutely nutso. He is just very strong. Very, very strong character. Not really much to be said. If you hit the hook, you cook. That's it, really. Next up, we have Serath. I think Serath is A tier. Previously, I would say she was at C tier. My eyes have been opened a little bit by Nitro. I think she's not really a jungler. I think her jungle potential is pretty weak right now, but her offlane potential is actually really high. As long as you're not playing into a Kwang, if you play into like a Zarus or a Steel specifically, or a Sevarog, those are your 3 primary matchups where you want to play Serath. She's very hard to gank, and she punishes people that end up dashing heavily. If a Steel ever dashes, you could just ult and walk him down the lane, for example. Same thing with a Zarus or a Sev. She's very strong at doing that, and she's good at diving backline as long as you build a little bit of the HP build with like Overlord and things like that. And she can absolutely still decimate you late game as a hyper carry. She's just really strong in the off lane. I definitely would not play her in jungle, but her off lane definitely is worth looking into if you're curious about playing her, especially with the HP build. Definitely a strong character as a counter pick. Would not be a priority pick, which is I don't think she's any higher than that. You're never going to pick Serath preemptively or really to take it away from anybody, but you could definitely pick it as a counter pick to some of the other soul lane picks. Then we have Sevarog. I believe I had Sevarog A+ in the last tier list a few months ago. I think he's kind of gone down a little bit in value, and I think the reason he's gone down in value is his solo lane has just gotten even harder to play. There's just more picks in the meta that counter him. There's more stuff that he doesn't want to play into, and it's just you're going to get bullied no matter what. But his jungle is still really good. His jungle, if he was only a jungler, I'd probably have him A+. But due to the fact that he just can't play lane, I have him at A. He also gets punished a little bit more by the camps. 4 camp being changed makes it a little bit harder to stack. He's not bad by any stretch. He's definitely very good, especially if you need a tank jungler. But you're definitely not top picking this character at any point. If anything, you're picking him 4th, 5th at the bottom of the draft, kind of as like a last, like you need a frontliner or you want like a flex pick in the 4th slot and 2nd pick so that you can then counter pick your 5th slot. He's just not really a top pick oriented character, and that's okay. But I think he's definitely very strong in the jungle. His solo lane definitely a little bit weaker. If you are playing Sevarog, I would highly recommend you play it jungle as opposed to off lane. Shinbi, another A tier character, hasn't really gotten touched too much. She does get bullied a little bit by Kwang, and she's just kind of a split push character. That's kind of what she does. Her jungle's not very good. It's even weaker now that you get like poked so much by camps, and her lane is just she shouldn't be in lane. You sit there and you scale, you farm, and that's basically what you do. You don't play to win the lane, you play to farm, and then you get late game and you either play to one-shot the enemy ADC or mid, or you go and split push and then try to take 1v1s. Different play style, not strong, not weak, just average solo laner that you're going to pick. The one problem that she does have, though, if you do play Shinbi, is you do need a frontliner elsewhere. Typically, if you play something like Shinbi, you're going to have a Riktor support, or you're going to have like a Rampage in the jungle, which does benefit her a little bit, but you're never really doing anything too crazy. You're just a hyper farm character that then tries to 1v1 people, or you try to one-shot somebody. Nothing too crazy, just a solid character. Next up, we have Steel. Still a menace. I think he's still pretty insane. Not quite S tier like he was in the previous tier list. He was previously the best solo laner. I no longer think he is the best solo laner. He is still good. I don't think he's the best anymore, though. He's still good in support. Nothing really changed there, and his jungle is okay. I think he's probably the best in the jungle. He is still a good flex pick. He's still solid to pick up early if you need a tank. I would probably pick him like 3rd, 4th. Doesn't really have any bad matchups. He's just kind of a little bit slow in the jungle, and his off lane is not quite as oppressive as it was, but that's okay. He does have a little bit of counter picks. People have gotten a little bit more used to playing against him since he's been picked so much. You'll see a lot more Zarus into him, Kwang really strong into him, or you just pick like Greystone, and then the Greystone kind of does whatever. You're never really gonna just a slap boxing match, and the Greystone scales just as well as the Steel does in most situations. Other than the fact that the Steel has CC, just a good character. Not too much to say about him. Moving on, we have the Fae. The Fae is, I think, a little bit underrated. I think previously I had her like B tier, probably. I think she is almost A plus. The only reason I'm going to put her A tier is because I don't think you're prioritized picking this character. I think when you pick it late as a counter pick. What do you pick it as a counter pick into? Howitzer. So typically the way that you would play draft is you pick Belica early, the enemy team picks Howitzer as the counter because that's what they're going to do. Then 4th, 5th pick, you pick something like the Fae or Gideon. I think typically the enemy team will probably ban Gideon if they think you're going to pick a mid laner. Otherwise, they just won't pick something, and in which case there could be other reasons you might not pick Gideon, like maybe they have a, Riktor, Narbash or something like that. Rampage rock that can cancel you, Dekker, something like that. And in that case, you would want to pick the Fae because Fae counters Howitzer, you get a lot of pressure. You're also good at killing tanks. So if you're against something like a Narbash, you're really good at applying anti-heal. If you're against like a Rampage, for example, very strong at killing them. You also destroy anybody that wants to go next. So Feng Mao gets beat up by you really hard. Kallari gets beat up really hard by you. You do have to be a little bit careful in the early game. But you do have a really strong roam, and then once the enemy team gets reclamation, if they go reclamation, you just end up becoming a DPS bot with things like Megacosm and Tainted Scepter, and you just proc your E on people. The more recent buffs that she got, where her E increases faster on more consecutive hits, is actually pretty significant. You do a lot more damage off of one or two hits of the E, as opposed to fully stacking it. So it's actually a lot more relevant than some people might actually notice. But I definitely recommend picking her up if you haven't been playing her recently. She is pretty good, especially if you're against Howitzer with that big body refrigerator hitbox. Then we have Twinblast. I think Twinblast is probably A plus tier. You could argue S tier. I think he's very good. He is probably on the same level as Drongo, maybe a little bit better than Drongo, just due to the fact that he has a little bit more pressure and he farms really fast, which I think is important in this meta. Drongo can't really farm the camps as much anymore since the camps get pulled. Twinblast can still do that. He works with either the pen build, which got buffed a little bit because of Infernum, or the attack speed build where you go Stormbreaker, Sky Splitter. He works fine with both of those. And he is very good at killing the frontline, more oriented comps with the Rampage and the Steals and things like that. So I'll put him S tier. I think he is probably a little bit better than Drongo, but I don't think if you pick Drongo over TB, it would really be that big of a negative for your team. It's just situationally on depending on what you want to do. Do you want more lockdown, or do you want a little bit more of a hyper carry type character on your team? Which is what TB does. I would definitely expect a lot of TB picks. He's also very safe. Very long range, good poke. I would expect him to be picked a lot. Just varying between him and Drongo is just a preference. I do expect him to be picked more than Drongo, though, in most games, I would say. Especially in like a high-level casual sense, I would say TB is probably a better carry than Drongo in that sense, for sure. Then we have Zarus. Zarus was a A+ solo laner. In the previous tier list, I think. This one, I think I'm going to move him to like A tier. I don't think he's a priority jungler at all. I don't think you're really wanting to pick this character jungle. You can, but I don't think it's anything crazy. As far as solo lane, he doesn't get as much pressure as he used to. He kind of gets bullied after level 6. For most characters, Kwang kind of cooks him a little bit. Greystone's great into him. Steel's fine. Even Grux just bullies him out of lane. Crunch is a little bit stronger in the lane. He does bully the weaker matchups, and you definitely can snowball the game a little bit, but he's never a priority pick. If you pick Zarus, you're picking Zarus because you like Zarus, or you want the cage specifically to combo with something else or to shut something else down, which is clearly fine. You can't build full tank on him and you can't build full damage on him, so he's kind of in a weird spot where you have to build hybrid, but when you build hybrid, you don't do either really better than anything else. And generally, if you want a character to be a tank, you're going to pick a tank like Steel or Greystone or something like that, and if you want a more bruiser-oriented character, you'll probably pick like a Crunch or a Grux, something like that most of the time. But he's definitely a solid pick, not bad, just never going to be a top priority pick unless you're trying to take it away from somebody that really likes the character, for example. Next up, we have Sparrow. She was, I think, the second worst character. I think I had her uh, slightly better than Morigesh last time. Now I think she's kind of like A tier, borderline A plus. I could definitely see her moving up more. I think she's a little bit of a sleeper pick right now. I think teams are still getting used to the buffs that she just received. I think she is pretty strong. I need some more testing and need to see her played a little bit more in comp before I put her any higher or anything like that. But I do think you could start seeing her played a lot more. I've been definitely playing her a lot more in mid. She's had a lot more. I've had a lot more success with that. I've been seeing other people play her a lot more in ADC in casual games, and I've been seeing a lot more success. She is kind of a character that once you get 4 items, you do kind of one shot everybody if you get the ability to tee off on them for more than 2 seconds, and that's you could say that's difficult to do, but that's difficult to do for any ADC, right? So it doesn't really matter if you're playing Sparrow or not. I do think the buff she received was pretty significant, and I would definitely imagine she gets played a little bit more. I just need to see her more in a competitive light before I really put her any higher. Wraith, probably the best ADC. Definitely the most consistently picked, I would say, or like prioritized. He gets banned a lot in the second phase, picks and bans. Definitely really strong at a casual level, at a high level, casual level. 1v9 hyper carry, basically one shots everybody. Can be played mid, can be played ADC. In competitive, you just absolutely obliterate the duo lane. If you pick this character with a character that has any CC on your team, like a Dekker or a Narbash, thunk into a combo and he absolutely one taps you level 3. There's not really much you can do about it. He is very good, rewind, fantastic ability. Not really a ton to say about him. He did get like shifted a little bit. I don't think that changes his strength at all. If anything, I would say he's a little bit stronger since the combo does slightly more damage in the early game, even though he does slightly less late game. When you move from doing 150% of somebody's HP late game to doing 140%, it doesn't matter because 140% is still going to one-shot you. So at the end of the day, I think he's still a S tier character and probably the best ADC in the game, especially with the fact that he can be easily flexed. Next up, we have Iggy. I think Iggy is just average. He doesn't do anything fantastic. He's just a good poke character, good at controlling lanes. I do think there is something to be said about him with Argus. I think if you have Argus support, he hasn't been allowed to be played in competitive yet, although I think he will be next week starting. People will start being able to play him, and I'll get a little bit more practice. I do think Argus is probably a better support, but when you have them together, you have 2 characters that absolutely obliterate objectives, and I think that's something that Iggy does really well. So I definitely think you could see some compositions where people try something like that, where they go Argus support with an Iggy mid lane, and then Iggy controls the mid lane. You start pulling objectives, and you just kind of burn them before the enemy team even has a chance to respond. Not a bad character, just kind of average. He doesn't do anything amazing. He doesn't do anything poor. He is just Iggy, really. Next up, we have probably the best character in the game right now, Kwang. Probably the most priority picked character. When you do picks and bans, this is the character you're trying to get. If you're second pick, you have to ban this character pretty much if you don't want to lose. He is incredible in jungle. He is the best solo laner in the game. He has no bad matchups. If you pick Kwang, you should guaranteed win the solo lane against any matchup. He is a good early game, good late game, good poke, good fish potential, good CC, good tankiness. He just does it all. There is, I don't think any character in the game that's probably more priority. I would put him as the best character in the game currently. That could change a little bit when Argus comes into the meta, when he starts getting allowed to be played. Argus could be the best character in the game. I think competitively speaking, Kwang is just because he's playable. When Argus gets put in, I think Argus is probably going to take his mantle as the best character in the game. But usually you're probably going to see these 2 characters banned in most games. Argus is absolutely insane. His mid lane's pretty average. I don't think it's amazing, but I don't think it's bad by any stretch. You have great setup for ganks and things like that and good DPS, but you're kind of just you're just a normal mage. I'd probably put him A+ in mid. In support, I would put him SS tier. His support is absolutely insane. You just hit a stun, you have insane damage, you have great mobility, you can save your team from stuff, knock them out of things. The pillar is an absolutely incredible ability. He does ridiculous damage, even with one item when he's behind. Just a great character in support. Absolutely busted beyond belief. I would definitely like to see him nerfed a little bit in the next patch, and I could definitely see it occurring. But for now, that's kind of where I would rate most of these characters. I'm just going to quickly go through and see if there's anybody that I would like to really move. I think this looks good to me. You could maybe move Gadget and Iggy down, move them both down maybe, something like this. I think I would pick them less often just due to the fact that you generally want a more priority mid laner. Typically, picking a low prio mid laner like Gadget or Iggy just leads to you losing the game before you get to play. So maybe I'd move them down. But other than that, I think most of these are probably where I would want them to be in terms of competitive play. You could maybe move Grux up to A, but besides that, I think most of this is where I would want it to be. But let me know what you guys think. If you like this or you like this kind of content, let me know if you want me to make more of this. There will be Xbox coming soon. I know that's coming on the 28th, so I might end up making a new build guide video for each role again. So if you guys would like that, let me know in the comments. Kind of like I did previously. It's definitely been a few months and some of the builds have changed a little bit. If you want more videos like that, let me know. I might also do, some role guides or something like that coming as well. So if that would interest you, please let me know. And I hope everybody has a good rest of their day. Then thank you for watching.